I grew up here in this area. I have an older sister, and she and I, both when we were in college, we used to work a waitress job in the summertime so that we could collect money for our school year. Well, my sister loved this job, but I didn't particularly care for it. And I was so glad after graduating from college that I got to go off into my career. I worked as a television news reporter for a CBS affiliate in Illinois for about 3 years. I loved a lot of things about that job, but there were some little ethical things that I didn't quite jive with, and I started to move out of that field. No wonder I ended up as a New Thought Unity minister. Yes. So, but the thing that I wanted to share about that is so important to me is that I ended up in my mid-20s actually quitting that job. Don't recommend that. But I moved back home and I had an opportunity to live with my dad. And I just knew that I had this vision of this corporate job where I was going to be able to use my skills in a new way. Well, let me tell you, when I got back home, it was a really long 9 months before I ended up finding that corporate job that I wanted. And I ended up back waiting tables again. That was one of my first big lessons in humility. And you know what? Today, I am so thankful for that experience. I'm talking about humility today because that is one of the qualities that spiritual leaders have. And I've been doing a series on claiming spiritual maturity. We started a couple weeks ago with talking about character and what our character looks like. And now I'm moving more into personal practice and transformation. Humility is sort of one of those that fits into both categories. I think it is part of our character, but I believe certainly that we need to practice it. So I want to dive into, as we begin today, to what humility actually means. And I did some research. This is the Bing Dictionary term. It says a modest view of one's importance. Now I have to tell you that when I was a reporter, I used to get all kinds of feedback of how great I was, and it was sort of weird. It's like it didn't matter what I did. It just came with the job. So when I was back to waiting tables again, there was this humbleness that was created. And I'm so glad that I had that opportunity to realize at a very young age that my identity is not connected to what I do. My divinity, who I am is my divinity, the Christ within. And that was part of my lesson in humility. I also think that humility is one of those qualities that's sort of hard to divine, sort of nebulous. So when we meet someone that actually has this quality about themselves, it's sort of obvious. Humility is not at all weak. Humility, in fact, is very, very powerful. As I did some research about this talk today, I was online and there were a lot of powerful men through history that have been talking about humility, and I really believe it's a quality both men and women need to create. But here's some quotes from some of the men that you may recognize. C.S. Lewis said, "Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less." And Albert Einstein said, "A true genius admits that she knows nothing." And then Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was a favorite of Charles Fillmore, he said, "A great man is always willing to be little." And Thomas Merton said, "Pride makes us artificial. It's humility that makes us real." And it's often thought that pride is perhaps an opposite of what it means to be humble. Now, our teachers tell us that the spiritual life is absolutely impossible without humility. In one of the books that I've been using for this series, it's called The Mystic Heart, written by Brother Wayne Teasdale. And he takes the conversation of humility much deeper. He even calls it humility of the heart. So this is what he calls and how he describes that. Humility of the heart keeps us honest, cutting away self-deception, falsehood, and inauthenticity. It focuses us to be real, even when it's uncomfortable. It rescues us from superficiality, and it compels us to always be true to ourselves and to others. So I mentioned in the first part of this series that there were a large number of religious spiritual leaders that came together in what has been called the Snowmass Dialogue in Colorado, not far from here. And this quality was actually part of the invitation that was presented to these people to invite them to come and have the conversation. I just wish that I had been like a little mouse in the room when this group of wise spiritual teachers had gotten together and were talking. What a treat that would have been. These folks know from personal experience that the real spiritual path is based on increasing degrees of humility. Now, this comes from that Snowmass dialogue. Humility of the heart is not about bowing and scraping before others, which I think often is what people think. It's about honesty and self-truth and egoless understanding, as opposed to the false self-projections of one's own limitations of where one stands in relation to others on the way. And Thomas Keating, who was part of that group, even took this a little bit further. He says, the greatest accomplishment in life is to be who you are, and that means to be who God wanted you to be when he created you. No other accomplishment in life compares to this attainment. So the humble man or woman has chosen to be fully who they are. Now, Brother Wayne Teasdale gave an example in his book of his Uncle John as someone that exemplified this. This was this man in his later years who dealt with cancer and had an operation where the surgeon made an error, and the man lost bladder control for the rest of his life. So he was a man who lived in diapers until the time that he died. What was amazing about that, from Brother Wayne Teasdale said, is that this man had an ability to live in complete humility. He was not resentful toward the surgeon. In fact, he did not sue the surgeon or pursue him in any way. He was able to completely accept what was going on in his life and live a joyful, humorous life, even in the midst of that. This story reminded me of something that I have heard quite often in work with 12-step groups. And there may be many people in this room that have said this prayer maybe every single day. So if you want to say it with me, feel free. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Uncle John knew this in a profound way, and this is a core teaching of all of the 12-step programs. It's all about humility. Now, if you're not familiar with humility, you're not humble, or haven't learned that skill yet, I can guarantee you that you will have opportunities to become humble, okay? Just as I did as a young woman. I want to share with you, this is from Thomas Keating, a very small book, a power-packed book called The Human Condition. And I've been sharing this book with my Licensed Unity teacher students at Unity Village and having a conversation. And a lot of times these students are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they're like, wow, I wish I'd had this book when I was 20 years old. It's like a blueprint of what it is to be on the spiritual journey. He says, the spiritual journey is not a career or a success story. It is a series of humiliations of the false self that become more and more profound. These make room inside us for the Holy Spirit to come in and heal. What prevents us from being available to God is gradually evacuated. We keep getting closer and closer to our center. Every now and then, God lifts a corner of the veil and enters into our awareness through various channels, as if to say, here I am. Where are you? Come and join me. And this may be a book that we study here maybe in a few months. It's a powerful book, and I'd like to share it with you. Now, in my research, I found this video from Oprah Winfrey and Nelson Mandela that I want to share with you. I just love Oprah. Does anybody else here love Oprah? Oh my gosh, love her. So it's a little long. It runs a little over 3 minutes. But again, this is an example of really just seeing someone with humility in action, Nelson Mandela.
To stay on earth. said to the producer, met with him in the room, and he said, "What is the subject of today's show?" Nelson Mandela. You are not modest, but a very humble man. I wanted to ask, because I think that is the characteristic that stands out for you above all of them, that you are a peacemaker inside yourself. And how do we begin? Those of us who aren't leading countries, but are just leading our own lives, leading our families, come to a sense of truth and reconciliation with ourselves, to be a peacemaker. How do you do that?
The first thing is to be honest with yourself. You can never have an impact on society if you have not changed yourself. And one of the most important weapons in changing yourself is to recognize that peace with people everywhere in the world want peace. But humility is one of the most important qualities which you must have. Because if you are humble, if you make people realize that you are no threat to them, then people will embrace you.
So he says, lead from the back and let others believe that they are in the front. I thought that was an incredibly powerful statement. I also wanted to add in something. There are, Mother Teresa also has her list of qualities of what she thinks it means to be humble. And I've asked some of our people from our choir to help share those. And we'll just pass the microphone down the row and then back to the next row. And just read these, strongly, and yet I would like everybody in the audience to listen in and see, where are you in your own growth when you hear these ideas from Mother Teresa?
Thank you. Speak as little as possible about yourself.
Accept censures, even if unmerited.
Choose always the more difficult task.
Accept small irritations with good humor.
Do not interfere with the affairs of others.
Do not seek to be admired and loved.
Be courteous and delicate, even when provoked by someone.
Accept contempt, being forgotten and disregarded.
Give in discussions, even when you are right.
Do not dwell on the faults of others. Give in to the will of others.
Do not protect yourself behind your own dignity.
Thank you for being willing to share those. And can you hear the innate wisdom that was in with each one of those comments? Very, very powerful. So thank you for being willing to share and participate. I want to move now to the next aspect of spiritual practice, which is, in and of itself, spiritual practice. The most basic spiritual practice that we've heard about in Unity has come from a series called Keys to the Kingdom, which I'm guessing many people here have participated in at one time or another. I see some heads nodding. And this is where people join together when we talk a lot about tithing of time, talent, and treasure. And just a brief explanation of what those terms mean. Time is about dedicating our own time to our own spiritual practice and development. Talent is about volunteering in some way, providing a social service perhaps. And then treasure is about giving income. And this is not about giving income to charity, but about giving income to where we feel spiritually fed. And hopefully that would be here at Unity of Lawrence. Now, this is an abundance building program. And because in Unity, we teach this because we know as we give, we receive. And I would say that in the studies that I've been doing with the new monasticism, it takes this concept much deeper. And that is what I wanted to share from the work of the mystic Hart and Wayne Teasdale. He says that daily spiritual practice is the technology of interchange. So of the 9 qualities of spiritual maturity, this is the most important one, folks, because it develops, it informs, and it matures every single other quality that we're working on. So in my early days of spiritual growth, I really thought it was just a meditation practice and that was it. But as I've grown, especially with my work and studying Ken Wilber's work, he wrote this book called Integral Life Practice. And notice I have a lot of Post-it notes in it out the front. You know, he has defined the very many different places that we can do work in our lives so that we can grow and develop. It's not just about the meditation, although that is a big part of it. I wanted to briefly run through some of these. So the first one, he has like 4 core modules of places that you can do work in your life. The first one is mind, going to school, getting your degree, reading, studying, writing and journaling, and discussion and debate are ideas in that sector. And then also we have to take care of our body because the body is a vessel for spirit. And this is about strength training and aerobic exercise and eating correctly, and perhaps yoga, sports, and even dance, which makes it a whole lot more fun, I think. And then spirit, this is where the meditation and prayer comes in. We've talked about the 3 faces of God in this church. The 3 faces are how we interpret God. You know, it's the web of the universe, it's our beloved other that we perhaps pray to, and then also there's what unity is so good at is the God within. And then also something that I really want to bring forward in the work that I do here in this church is that there's an element of shadow that we all have to work with. You know, I believe that Myrtle and Charles Fillmore knew this aspect about personal development many decades ago, and yet somewhere along the path in unity, I think some of that message has gotten lost. We became so focused on being positive all the time that perhaps people weren't willing to do their shadow work. Well, let me tell you, in the last 5 to 7 years, there's a big awareness going on in unity, and people are diving into this. So shadow work can involve psychotherapy, journaling, family and couples therapy, and perhaps even dream work. Now, I don't want to leave with just the 4 modules. There are actually other modules that you can focus on as well, things like ethics and work and relationships and money and creativity. And again, if you're interested, you can read this book and explore those different areas and pick out the ones that are right for you. I'm also doing something where I believe when I mentioned books in the service, I'm going to start writing those down and having them out on the front counter in the lobby, so that if you would like to, and there's even paper and pencil out there, if you'd like to write down the names of these books, then you can certainly take them home and look at them yourself. And someone today suggested, well, let's do a book study on one, and we'll certainly look at doing that as well.
Take the books home.
Well, and you might have to buy your own book. And I bet somebody would help you do that, okay? So, as I was searching online, I found that this is a picture of Jordan Bach, and I'm talking about new monastics in this series. These are people that are dedicating their lives to a spiritual life, and yet they're not necessarily wearing religious robes like you might expect. These are people out in the world that are living a spiritual life and wanting to focus on that. Now, he's a Facebook spiritual blogger, and he's also a life coach. And he says that he does 3 things every day that he thinks are crucial for his own spiritual development. He mentioned the first one is morning time, and that could be as short as a minute, although it can expand to a full meditation session if he wants to do that. He said the second one is evening prayer, whatever that feels right for him at the time. And then the third one is kind of what made me laugh, because he went on about this for quite a while. He said cold showers. That's his practice. And he said there was a reason for this. It was about focus, mental focus. If he took a cold shower, he was able to mentally focus in a way that he was not able to do before. So again, this is about self-awareness of yourself and what works in your own life. Spiritual practice is to the mystical life what food and water is to the body. It is the inner source of nourishment and growth, and it unites with the efforts of the divine, or the ultimate nature of the mind itself. So I can only ask you, as I've been reading through these slides, talking about this subject, was there anything that kind of showed up for you that perhaps you were like, ooh, I need to work on that? So you might want to jot that down before you leave today so you don't forget. And again, if you've not started a meditation practice, I recommend you do that 5 minutes a day. That's all it takes to get started. And you can come and talk to me if you want help on that. So the third category that I want to talk about is mature self-knowledge. Socrates said, know thyself. Mature self-knowledge happens when we move beyond denial. Denial of our faults and limitations, our buried motives and hidden agendas, and beyond judgment of others, beyond projection on others of our own need for our own inner work. So without mature self-knowledge, we actually close ourselves off to the evolutionary impulse of the universe. Now, this is a massive subject, I'll have to let you know. So I just picked a couple different areas that I wanted to bring forward to put forward with your attention. And that is willingness, again, to do that shadow work that I was talking about. Two ways that I do that have been through breath work, which I'm a breath work facilitator, and I'm actually excited to announce that I'm going to be offering a breath work session that's a love offering thing after the new year. I'll talk about that more in announcements later today. But breath work has been a very easy way for me to gradually move into doing breath work when I thought or shadow work when I thought it might be somewhat intimidating. And then the other thing you may have heard about in Unity is called the Q effect, and that's a program where some Unity people have gotten together and figured out a way to go through a worksheet and write out what's going on for them emotionally and to be able to work through their issue and get to the shadow issue and transform it so that they can live from a place of more empowerment. And we may yet do some of that work here in this church as well. The other area that I really thought was key is, a lot of this mature self-work sounds very serious. And I'm like, oh my goodness, do we really have to do all that? But there's this, we can cultivate joy and humor even along the way in the work that we're doing. And I found this silly video. This is called Laughter Yoga. And the practitioners of this are really actually serious about it because they know that it works. This is a combination of breathing techniques of yoga with laughter. And I'm going to have it's only about 50 seconds long. I'll share with you, it's silly, and we have our chorus here. If you want to sing along, feel free. But this is called the Fruit Salad Song, okay? And they're singing banana, mango, and kiwi. Okay, so have fun.
Funny.
Okay, so that's enough. Did you think that was funny? I thought that was funny. So let's have some fun while we're doing all this work, okay? Okay, so these are the first 6 areas of claiming spiritual maturity that I've been talking about. Yes, this is where I want to be. And again, I've talked about each little baby step is really a place that we can take to transform ourselves in a very big way. So find out what that baby step is for you. Of course, the ultimate goal in all of this work is the transformation of ourselves. You heard Nelson Mandela talk about. We're working on changing ourselves so that we can be better people. And before we close, I want to quickly go through the 7 areas of transformation that we're working on. And see, in your own process of spiritual development in your own life, see if you've seen shifts in any of these categories as you have grown. The first one's consciousness. As our understanding increases, ignorance dissipates, and then we can alter or modify our motives, outgrowing the selfish ones. The next one is will. The will becomes stable in desiring the good, in transcending self-concern and preoccupation, so that it can respond to others with love and compassion. The next one is emotions. The emotions achieve a greater stability and order, and aren't we glad to hear that? They are no longer a distraction, but are brought in harmony to serve the spiritual journey. The next one is character. The character then makes the shift from self-occupation to love, from hypocrisy to sincerity, from ignorance to wisdom, from human limitation to the liberating power of grace. Imagination. Imagination operates in conjunction with the inner life of the person, creating an effective center of willing, knowing, acting, and being. and memory. Memory no longer sits in isolation, wallowing in its old hurts, injuries, and traumas of early life, but becomes completely present to the eternal now. And then finally, it's all about behavior and action. A living, mature, integrated spiritual life transforms our behaviors and actions, conforming them to the requirements of love. So again, remember the Nelson Mandela video. Didn't he just bring that forward with every word that he said? And I actually believe this is the message of Jesus' birth during this time of year. This is why we get so helpful and celebratory during this time. You know, each of us have within us the ability to bring these qualities forward. We just have to be willing to do that. I have found if I am willing, somehow Spirit seems to step in and do the work for me. Okay? I see people shaking their head. Yes, they agree. It's all about acting from a place of compassion and love. And it really is all about love, folks. So with that, please join me in welcoming the Kelly Hunt Christmas Choir back to the stage. Thank you.